My parents and sister demanded I give up the master suite in the house I legally inherited. When I refused, they physically tried to throw me out. So, I called the police, had them removed, and watched my father get arrested for breaking back in. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The pounding in my head felt like a construction crew was taking a jackhammer to the inside of my skull. I had been battling a severe migraine for 3 days, the kind that makes light feel like a physical assault and sound feel like a knife edge. I was curled up in the fetal position on my bed, the blackout curtains in my master bedroom drawn tight, trying to breathe through the nausea. This room was my sanctuary. It was the only place in the house where I could escape the noise, the demands, and the overwhelming presence of the people I had graciously allowed to live under my roof. I had just drifted into a fragile, shallow sleep when the door was thrown open. It didn't just open, it slammed against the wall with a violence that made the pictures rattle. I jolted up, a gasp tearing through my throat as the sudden movement sent a fresh spike of agony through my temples. The hallway light flooded in, blinding me. Silhouetted in the doorway were 3 figures: my father, Carter, my mother, Haley, and my younger sister, Bella. "Sophia, wake up," Carter boomed, his voice devoid of any concern. He flipped the light switch on. The sudden brightness was excruciating. I shielded my eyes with my arm, squinting through the pain. "Dad, what is going on?" I croaked, my voice thick with sleep and pain. "I have a migraine, please turn off the light." "We need to talk," Haley said. Her voice was soft, that deceptively gentle tone she always used right before she asked for something unreasonable. She walked over to the window and ripped the blackout curtains open. "It's the middle of the afternoon. You can't sleep all day." "I'm sick," I whispered, pulling the duvet up to my chin. "Can this wait?" "No, it can't," Bella chimed in. She was leaning against the doorframe, scrolling on her phone, barely looking at me. "I have a brand deal deadline coming up, and the lighting in the guest room is trash. I need to start filming by tomorrow." I blinked, trying to process her words through the fog of my headache. What does that have to do with me? Carter stepped further into the room, his heavy work boots thudding on the hardwood floor, the floor I had paid to have refinished just 2 months ago. He crossed his arms over his chest, his posture radiating a terrifying mix of arrogance and authority. "We've made a decision as a family," Carter announced. "Bella's career is taking off. She needs space. Proper space. The guest room is too cramped and the windows face north. It's gloomy. She needs the master suite." I stared at him. The words hung in the air, absurd and heavy. "She needs the master suite?" I repeated slowly. "This is my room, Dad. This is my office. My desk is here. My servers are here. I work from here." "You can work from the basement," Carter dismissed, waving a hand as if swatting away a fly. "Or the guest room. It doesn't matter where you sit with a laptop, Sophia. You just tap on keys. Bella is creating art. She needs the aesthetic." "I am not moving out of my own bedroom," I said, my voice trembling, not from fear, but from a sudden, cold shock. "I own this house. You are guests here." Carter's face darkened. The air in the room shifted from annoyed to menacing instantly. He took a step closer to the bed, looming over me. "Don't you dare speak to me like that," he snarled. "I am your father. I am the head of this household. It doesn't matter whose name is on some piece of paper downtown. I decide who sleeps where. We're moving your things out starting tonight. Bella moves in tomorrow." "You can't be serious." I looked at my mother, pleading for sanity. "Mom." Haley sighed, looking at me with a disappointed frown. "Sophia, don't be selfish. Your sister has a real shot at this influencer thing. You already have a stable job. Why do you need all this luxury? It's just wasted on you." The betrayal hit me harder than the migraine. It wasn't just that they wanted the room, it was the total erasure of my ownership, my boundaries, and my worth. I looked at their faces, entitled, cold, resolute. "Get out," I whispered. "We're leaving," Carter said, turning to the door. Start packing. If you aren't done by dinner, I'll do it for you, and I won't be gentle with your little computer toys. They walked out, leaving the door wide open and the lights blazing. As the sound of their footsteps faded down the hall, I realized that the headache was no longer the worst pain I was feeling. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. I didn't move for a long time. I couldn't. The physical pain in my head was now throbbing in rhythm with the racing of my heart. I sat there, staring at the open doorway, waiting for them to come back and say it was a joke. But I knew them better than that. My family didn't do jokes, they did power plays. Eventually, the nausea subsided enough for me to stand. I closed the door and locked it, a futile gesture. I knew, considering Carter had installed the locks himself years ago and likely had a master key or just a screwdriver to bypass it. I went into the ensuite bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked pale, ghostly, with dark circles under my eyes that spoke of exhaustion deeper than sleep could fix. I could hear them downstairs. The acoustics in this old Victorian house were excellent, carrying sound through the vents with crystal clarity. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and just listened. She's going to drag her feet, I heard Bella's voice. I told you she's obsessed with this room. It's so selfish. Don't worry, princess, Carter's voice rumbled, the sound of the refrigerator door opening and closing accompanying his words. She'll move. She always does what she's told in the end. She's soft. She doesn't have the stomach for a fight. I just don't want any drama, Haley added, the clinking of pots and pans suggesting she was starting dinner. I just want everyone to be happy, and Sophia really doesn't need all that space. It's unfair, really, when you think about it. One person in the biggest room while the three of us share the smaller ones. I gripped the edge of the porcelain sink until my knuckles turned white. Unfair? I had taken them in when they were evicted. I had paid off their moving truck. I paid the electricity, the water, the internet that Bella used to upload her videos. I asked for nothing in return but peace, and now they were carving up my home like vultures on a carcass. I quietly unlocked my bedroom door and crept out to the landing. I needed water, and I refused to be a prisoner in my own home. As I walked down the stairs, the smell of roast chicken wafted up. It was my favorite meal, one my grandmother used to make. The irony stung. When I entered the kitchen, the conversation stopped abruptly. It wasn't a guilty silence, it was an expectant one. They were waiting for me to capitulate. Haley was at the counter, chopping carrots. She looked up and offered a tight, strained smile. Feeling better, honey? I'm making dinner. We can all sit down and discuss the logistics of the switch after we eat. There is no switch, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my legs. I walked to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water. I am not moving out of my room. Bella can use the dining room for her videos if she needs space, or she can rent a studio with her earnings. Bella let out a sharp, mocking laugh from the table where she was scrolling through her phone. Earnings? I'm building a brand, Sophia. You wouldn't understand. It's about investment. And the dining room has hideous wallpaper. I need the master. It has the bay window. It's not happening, I repeated, unscrewing the cap of my water bottle. Carter turned from the stove, a spatula in hand. He pointed it at me like a weapon. I didn't ask you, Sophia. I told you. You're my daughter, and as long as you live under my roof. It's my roof, I interrupted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The silence that followed was terrifying. Carter dropped the spatula on the counter with a loud clatter. He walked over to me, invading my personal space until I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. You listened to me, he hissed, his face inches from mine. You might have tricked your grandmother into signing this place over to you, but you are a child. You don't know how to run a house. You don't know how to maintain it. Without me, this place falls apart. I am the man of this house. And if you disrespect me again, you'll see exactly how much authority that piece of paper really gives you. He turned his back on me, dismissing me entirely. Now go pack. I want the first box out by 8 p.m. I watched his broad back, the muscles tense under his flannel shirt. I looked at my mother, who busied herself with the carrots, refusing to meet my eye. I looked at Bella, who was smirking at her phone screen. They thought they had won. They thought I was the same terrified little girl who used to hide in her room when they argued. They thought their bullying was the ultimate law of the land. I turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word. I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding a rhythm of pure, cold rage. They thought they held all the cards because they were louder, stronger, and more aggressive. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. To understand why this betrayal cut so deep, you have to understand the history of this house. It wasn't just a building, it was a legacy. My grandmother, Rose, had bought this house 40 years ago with her own money after her divorce. It was her symbol of independence. Growing up, my parents, Carter and Haley, were chaotic. Carter was a construction manager who made good money but spent it faster than he earned it on new trucks, bad investments, and get-rich-quick schemes. Haley was a school administrator who never said no to him. We moved 5 times before I was 12. Stability was a foreign concept to me, except when I visited Grandma Rose. When Grandma got sick 3 years ago, I was the one who moved in to care for her. I was 26, working remotely as a data analyst. I spent my days crunching numbers and my nights changing bedpans and reading to her. My parents visited maybe once a month, usually to ask for a loan. Bella, who was 20 at the time, was too busy partying to visit at all. When Grandma passed, the reading of the will was a shock to everyone but me. She left the house, her savings, and everything inside it explicitly to me. The will had a specific clause. To my son Carter, I leave nothing, for he has had his inheritance in handouts over the years. To my granddaughter Sophia, I leave my home, in hopes she maintains the sanctuary I built. My parents were furious. They contested the will, of course, but Grandma's lawyer was ironclad. The house was mine. For a year, I lived in peace. I renovated the master suite to be the perfect home office. I had 3 monitors set up, a dedicated server rack in the walk-in closet, and soundproofing so I could work on sensitive client data without distraction. It was my professional command center. Then, 6 months ago, my parents lost their rental. Carter had been fired for insubordination, arguing with a site inspector, and they were broke. They showed up at my doorstep with suitcases and tears. Just for a few weeks, Haley had wept, just until Dad finds a new project. I couldn't turn them away. I was raised to value family, even a flawed one. I gave them the entire guest wing, 2 bedrooms, and a private bath. It was more than generous. Then Bella moved in 3 months later. She had dropped out of college to become a lifestyle influencer, which apparently involved filming, get ready with me videos, and complaining about how hard her life was. She took the second guest bedroom. Suddenly, I was a guest in my own home. Carter took over the garage with his tools, parking his massive truck in the driveway so I had to park on the street. Haley took over the kitchen, rearranging my cupboards and losing my expensive cookware. Bella took over the living room, setting up ring lights and tripods everywhere, screaming at me if I walked through the background of her shot. And now the master suite. I sat at my desk, looking at the family photo from 10 years ago that sat on my shelf. In the photo, Carter had his hand on Bella's shoulder, beaming. I was standing off to the side, half out of the frame. It had always been this way. Bella was the golden child, the one who needed protection and adoration. I was the utility player, the one who got good grades, got a good job, and was expected to quietly support the stars of the show. Carter, at 56, was a man who defined himself by his dominance. He was broad-shouldered, loud, and used his physical presence to intimidate anyone who disagreed with him. He viewed my ownership of the house as a clerical error, a temporary glitch in the natural order where he was king. Haley, 54, was the peacemaker, which really meant she was the silencer. She smoothed things over by forcing the victim to apologize to the aggressor. Her soft voice was more dangerous than Carter's shouting because she made you feel like you were the crazy one for having boundaries. And Bella, 23, she was beautiful, charismatic, and completely hollow. She had never been told no in her life. If she wanted a toy, she got it. If she wanted my clothes, she took them. Now she wanted my room. The doorknob to my bedroom rattled. "Sophia," it was Carter's voice, muffled through the wood. "I'm coming in to measure the walls for Bella's shelves." I stared at the lock. I knew he was going to force it. He didn't think I would actually stop him. He thought I was just a barrier to be bulldozed. "Do not come in," I said, my voice loud and clear. "Don't be childish," he growled. I heard the distinct click-whir of a power drill. He wasn't using a key, he was drilling out the lock mechanism. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just a boundary crossing, this was a violation. He was dismantling my safety, physically removing the barriers I had put up, just to prove he could. The lock spun, the door clicked open. Carter stood there, drill in hand, a smug grin on his face. Bella was behind him, holding a tape measure. "See," Carter said, stepping into my room without hesitation. "Nothing keeps family." "Out." I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, the fear evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "Get out," I said. "Or what?" Carter laughed, looking around the room as if he already owned it. "Or I call the police," I said. Carter stopped laughing. He looked at me with genuine confusion, then sneered. "You wouldn't dare. I'm your father. The police will laugh in your face." "Try me," I said, reaching for my phone. My hand hovered over my phone screen, my thumb trembling slightly over the emergency call button. Carter watched me, his eyes narrowing, waiting to see if I would bluff. When I didn't immediately press it, he snorted, a sound of pure derision. "That's what I thought," he sneered. "Put the phone away, Sophia. Stop being dramatic." He turned his back to me and gestured to Bella. "Belle, grab that end of the tape measure. Let's see if your vanity will fit on this wall." Bella flounced past me, bumping my shoulder intentionally. "Move, you're blocking the flow." I didn't argue, I didn't scream. I simply turned around, walked out of the room, and went downstairs to the kitchen. My heart was pounding, but my mind was icy. Carter was right about one thing: calling the police right now might be messy. It was a civil dispute in their eyes. He was a resident, even if he wasn't on the deed. I needed something more concrete. I needed leverage that couldn't be argued away with family matters. I grabbed my laptop bag from the dining room table, where I'd left it earlier, and headed for the back door. "Where are you going?" Haley asked from the living room, where she was folding laundry. "Dinner is almost ready." "I'm going out," I said flatly. "Don't be late," she called after me, her voice sickeningly normal. "And bring back some wine if you pass the store." I drove to a coffee shop 3 towns over, far enough that I wouldn't run into anyone we knew. I ordered a black coffee, opened my laptop, and began to work. Not my day job, but the work of dismantling my family's hold on my life. I knew Carter had a history of creative accounting. It was why Grandma Rose had cut him off. But living with me, he'd gotten sloppy. He used my Wi-Fi for everything. And being a data analyst meant I knew exactly how to monitor traffic on my own network. I logged into my router's admin panel and pulled the logs for the past 3 months. I wasn't looking for P*RN or anything trivial. I was looking for financial activity. Carter had claimed he was unemployed and broke, which was why I was covering all the bills. It didn't take long. His MAC address was associated with heavy traffic to an online gambling site. But more interestingly, there were consistent, large file uploads to a cloud storage service I didn't recognize. I dug deeper. I accessed the shared family folder we had set up for emergency documents, a folder I knew he used as a dump for his chaotic desktop files because he was terrified of losing data. I found a subfolder labeled Old Jobs. Inside were invoices, recent invoices. Carter wasn't unemployed. He had been working under the table as a consultant for a sketchy contracting firm for the last 4 months. The invoices were made out to him, totaling over $15,000 in unreported income. But that wasn't the smoking gun. The smoking gun was a series of emails he had forwarded to himself from his old work account, likely to keep a copy. They detailed a plan to claim squatters' rights or tenants' rights on my property. He had been emailing a buddy of his who was a paralegal, asking specific questions. How long do I have to live there to claim residency? If I pay for a repair, does that give me ownership stake? He wasn't just an arrogant father. He was actively plotting to steal my house. Then I saw the kicker. A text file named Reno Plans. I opened it. It was a budget for knocking down the wall between the master bedroom and the guest room to create a suite for him and Haley, moving Bella to the 3rd floor, and converting basement to rental unit for Sophia. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. They weren't just taking my room. They were planning to move me into the basement and rent it back to me. I closed the laptop. I had the invoices proving he had income and was lying about his financial status to sponge off me. I had the emails proving malicious intent to usurp my property rights, but I needed legal force. I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew Carter feared, Mr. Henderson, my grandmother's attorney. He was retired now, but he had given me his personal number, just in case. "Mr. Henderson," I said when he picked up, "this is Sophia. You were right about my father. I need to serve an eviction notice. Immediately." When I returned to the house, it was dark. The lights in the master bedroom were blazing. I could see shadows moving across the window, my window. I walked into the house with a calm I didn't feel. The smell of dinner had been replaced by the smell of sawdust. I walked up the stairs. The door to my room was off its hinges, leaning against the hallway wall. Inside, my room was unrecognizable. My bed had been dismantled and shoved into the corner. My desk, with my expensive monitors, was pushed against the wall, unplugged haphazardly. Bella was directing Carter, who was hammering a nail into the wall I had just painted last year. "No higher," Bella commanded. "The ring light needs to be at eye level." "What are you doing?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. Carter turned, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Finally back. Grab the other end of this rug. We need to move it." I said, "What are you doing?" I repeated, stepping into the room. "We're moving you out," Carter said, as if explaining something to a toddler. "We told you, tonight's the night. I put your clothes in garbage bags there in the hall." I looked at the black plastic bags piled up like trash. My clothes, my life. "You need to stop," I said, "right now." "Or what?" Bella scoffed. "You gonna cry?" "No," I said. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. It wasn't the official eviction notice yet. That would be served by a process server in the morning. This was a printout of the invoices I had found. "I know you have money, Dad," I said. Carter froze, the hammer lowered slowly. "What are you talking about?" "I know about the consulting gig," I said, holding up the paper. $15,000 in the last 4 months, while you let me pay for your groceries, your gas, and your internet, while you cried poverty so I wouldn't ask for rent. Haley appeared in the doorway, looking nervous. "Sophia, what is that?" "Proof," I said, turning to her. "Proof that he's been lying to you, too. Unless you knew. Did you know he has 15 grand stashed away while asking me for money to fill his truck?" Haley looked at Carter, her eyes widening. "Carter, is that true?" "She's hacking," Carter shouted, his face turning red. "She's spying on me. That's illegal." "It's my network," I said calmly. "And you're using it to plan how to steal my house. I saw the emails to your paralegal friend. I saw the plans to put me in the basement." Bella looked confused. "Wait, what plans? I thought this was just about my room." "He's using you, Bella," I said, looking at my sister. "He doesn't care about your influencer career. He wants the master suite for himself eventually. The plan is to combine rooms. You're just the excuse to get me out." "That's a lie," Carter roared. He lunged forward and snatched the paper from my hand, crumpling it up. "You ungrateful little brat, spying on your own father. I should throw you out on the street right now." "You can't," I said, standing my ground. "Because you are a guest, and as of this moment, you are an unwelcome one." "I have rights," Carter screamed, veins bulging in his neck. "I've lived here for 6 months, I have tenant rights, you can't just kick me out." "Actually," I said, playing my ace, "since you've never paid rent and we have no lease, you are considered a tenant at sufferance in this state. And since I have proof of malicious intent and property damage," I pointed to the door off its hinges, "I can file for an emergency protective order." "You wouldn't," Haley whispered, her hand over her mouth. "Sophia, please, he's your father." "He's a thief," I said coldly, "and a liar, and he has destroyed my room." "This is my house," Carter bellowed, throwing the hammer. It smashed into the drywall inches from my head, leaving a gaping hole. The room went dead silent. Bella screamed. Haley gasped. I looked at the hole in the wall, then back at Carter. He was breathing heavily, his fists clenched, realizing he had just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. "Thank you," I said softly. "That was exactly what I needed." I turned and walked out of the room, pulling my phone out. "Where are you going?" Carter yelled, panic edging into his voice. "Sophia, get back here." I didn't stop. I walked down the stairs, out the front door, and into the cool night air. I dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? "My father just attacked me with a hammer and is destroying my home," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I need police assistance immediately." The next hour was a blur of flashing lights and shouting. 2 police cruisers pulled up. I met the officers at the curb, showing them the hole in the wall and the door off its hinges. "He threw a hammer at you?" the older officer asked, eyeing the damage. "Yes," I said. "He's been aggressive all day. He broke the lock to get in. I don't feel safe." Carter tried to play the reasonable dad routine. He came out to the porch, hands raised, smiling that charming smile he used on clients. "Officers, I'm sorry," he said smoothly. "It's just a family dispute. My daughter is having a bit of a mental episode. She's very stressed with work. The hom." Slipped out of my hand while I was doing repairs. "Repairs?" the officer asked, looking at the door lying in the hallway. "Looks like you took the door off." "We were renovating," Carter insisted. "She agreed to it. Now she's changing her story." "I did not agree," I said firmly. "I want them removed, tonight." The officers conferred. Because he hadn't actually hit me, and because residency laws are tricky, they couldn't arrest him for assault without more evidence. But they could enforce a cooling-off period. "Ma'am, since he has established residency, we can't evict him without a court order," the officer explained apologetically. "However, given the property damage and the threat, we can ask him to leave for the night to de-escalate. If he refuses, we can arrest him for disorderly conduct." Carter, realizing he was losing control, puffed up his chest. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home." "Sir, you don't own the property," the officer said, "and you just admitted to causing damage. You can leave voluntarily for the night, or you can come with us in cuffs. Your choice." Haley grabbed Carter's arm. "Carter, please, let's just go to a motel, please." Carter glared at me with pure venom. "Fine, we'll go. But don't think this is over, Sophia. You're declaring war on your own family." They packed overnight bags. Bella was crying, accusing me of ruining her life because she couldn't film her morning routine. They left, their taillights fading into the darkness. I didn't sleep. I spent the night building my case. I printed the emails, the bank statements, the renovation plans. I took photos of every inch of damage in the room. I downloaded the audio from the security camera in the hallway. It had captured the sound of the hammer hitting the wall and his scream. By 8:00 a.m., I was at the courthouse. I filed for an emergency temporary restraining order, TRO, against Carter, citing domestic violence and property damage. With the police report and the audio evidence, the judge granted it immediately. It ordered him to stay 100 yards away from me and the residence. I also filed the formal eviction paperwork for Haley and Bella. They weren't violent, but they were complicit. They had 30 days to vacate legally, but with the TRO, Carter couldn't step foot on the property starting now. I returned home around noon, exhausted but fortified by the stack of legal papers in my passenger seat. I called a locksmith on the way and scheduled a full rekeying of the house for that afternoon. When I pulled into the driveway, my heart dropped. Carter's truck was there. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had agreed to leave for the night. The TRO hadn't been served yet, but he knew he was on thin ice. I parked on the street, not blocking him in, and walked cautiously toward the house. The front door was slightly ajar. I heard the sound of ripping wood. I crept to the window. Carter was inside the living room. He wasn't packing. He was destroying. He had a crowbar and was ripping the baseboards off the walls. He was smashing my grandmother's antique vase. "If I can't have it," I heard him mutter, "nobody can." He was methodically wrecking the house, so that even if I won, I would inherit a ruin. Haley was sitting on the couch, sobbing, doing nothing to stop him. Bella was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in her room or the car. I didn't go inside. I didn't scream. I went back to my car, locked the doors, and called the police again. "This is Sophia again," I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline. "I called last night. My father is back. He is destroying the interior of the house with a crowbar. I have a restraining order granted this morning, though not yet served. He is dangerous." "Officers are en route," the dispatcher said. "Do not approach the house." I watched from my car as Carter tore down the curtains in the living room. He was escalating. He was desperate. He knew his control was gone, so he was resorting to pure destruction. But he had made a fatal error. Breaking back in after police involvement wasn't a civil dispute anymore. It was criminal trespassing, and destroying the property, that was felony vandalism. He wasn't just losing the house today, he was losing his freedom. The arrival of the police this time was not a polite knock on the door. It was a swarm. 3 cruisers screeched into the driveway and onto the lawn, lights blazing. Officers spilled out, hands resting on their holsters, their demeanor entirely different from the night before. This was no longer a domestic dispute, it was an active crime scene. "Police, come out with your hands up," the lead officer shouted through a megaphone. I watched from my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my fingers were numb. Inside the house, the noise of destruction stopped abruptly. For a long moment, nothing happened. The silence was heavier than the noise had been. Then, the front door swung open. Carter stepped. Head out. He wasn't holding the crowbar anymore, but he looked deranged. His shirt was torn, covered in drywall dust. His face was a mask of red fury. "This is my house," he screamed at the officers, pointing a shaking finger at them. "You can't tell me what to do in my own house. I built this family. I own them." "Sir, get on the ground, now." The officers advanced, weapons drawn but pointed low. "I'm not getting on the ground for you," Carter bellowed. He took a step forward, aggressive and stupid. "I am a citizen. I have rights." "Get on the ground." Carter lunged, not at the officers, but back toward the door, as if he intended to barricade himself inside. 2 officers tackled him before he could cross the threshold. The impact was visceral. They hit the porch hard. Carter struggled, kicking and screaming obscenities that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. "You're hurting me, police brutality. Haley, film this, film this." Haley stumbled out of the door, her phone in her hand, but she wasn't filming. She was shaking, staring at her husband pinned to the floor of the porch he had once claimed to rule. Bella appeared behind her, looking pale and terrified, her influencer persona completely shattered by the reality of her father in handcuffs. They hauled Carter to his feet. He was panting, his face scraped against the wood. He looked up and saw me sitting in my car. His eyes locked onto mine. The hate in them was absolute. "You did this," he screamed, straining against the cuffs. "You ungrateful little traitor. I gave you life. You owe me everything." I opened my car door and stepped out. I walked past the officers, past my weeping mother, past my frozen sister. I stopped 10 feet from him. I held up the restraining order I had picked up that morning. "I owe you nothing. I said, my voice steady and loud enough for everyone to hear. You stole from me, you threatened me, you destroyed my home, and now you're going to jail. Haley, Carter shouted, turning to my mother. Tell them it's a mistake. Haley looked at him. Then she looked at the shattered window, the broken door, the pieces of Grandma's vase on the entryway floor. For the first time in her life, the fog seemed to lift. You broke Rose's vase, she whispered, the one she brought from Ireland. Who cares about the damn vase? Carter roared. I do, Haley said softly. She took a step back away from him. I do. The officers shoved Carter into the back of the cruiser. He continued to scream until the door slammed shut, silencing him. I looked at the house. It was wounded, scarred, and violated, but it was still standing. And for the first time in 6 months, it was mine again. The aftermath was swift and brutal for Carter. Because the value of the damage he caused exceeded $5,000, he had destroyed custom cabinetry, antique furniture, and structural drywall. He was charged with felony vandalism, in addition to resisting arrest and violating the implied peaceful enjoyment covenant of his tenancy. The old jobs folder I found became the centerpiece of the prosecution. It proved he had the means to pay for damages, but chose destruction instead. It painted him not as a desperate father, but as a malicious conman. Haley and Bella moved out that night. I gave them 24 hours to collect their things, supervised by a hired security guard. I didn't trust them not to steal or break something else in a fit of spite. Bella tried to appeal to me as she packed her ring lights. Sophia, where am I supposed to go? My followers think I live in a mansion. Tell them the truth, I said, leaning against the doorframe of my ruined bedroom. Tell them you're moving into an apartment because you can't afford a mansion. It makes for great content. Starting over is a very popular niche. She glared at me, but she packed her boxes. Haley was quieter. She looked older, smaller. Before she left, she handed me a box. Inside were the shards of Grandma's vase. I'm sorry, she said. It was weak and it was late, but it was there. I should have stopped him years ago. Yes, I said, you should have. I didn't offer her a place to stay. I didn't offer her money. I let her leave. She moved in with her sister in the next state. Bella ended up renting a studio apartment with 2 roommates, complaining about it daily on TikTok until her followers got bored of the negativity and her view counts tanked. Carter spent 3 months in county jail awaiting trial because he couldn't make bail. I certainly wasn't paying it, and Haley had no money. He eventually took a plea deal: 18 months probation, mandatory anger management, and full restitution for the damages to my house. It took me 4 months to fix the house. I hired a contractor, a woman with excellent references who didn't mansplain drywall to me. We knocked down the wall Carter had damaged, but not to make a bigger room. I turned the guest room into a library. I installed a state-of-the-art security system. Cameras cover every angle. The locks are biometric. 6 months after the arrest, I sat in my restored master bedroom. My desk was back, my monitors glowing. The walls were a calming sage green. It was quiet. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Carter. The subject line was blank. I didn't open it. I selected it, moved it to the legal evidence folder just in case, and then blocked his address. I looked out the window at the garden below. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the lawn. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was safe. And for the first time, I felt like the true owner of my life.